Good morning. Welcome back to paper 4 Indian Economy and Development, under which today's topic is Structure and Growth of Indian Economy. I am Dr. 𝗬𝗑𝗏𝗎 from Government City College, a subject expert. I am going to explain about the structure and growth of Indian economy. As you are seeing that the topic is going to cover how the structure of the Indian economy has seen drastic changes over a period of time, and these structural changes have contributed towards the growth of the Indian economy. Today's topic is comprised of three important aspects. One is the structure of the Indian economy, how were the changes in the structure of Indian economy, and the second aspect happens to be the growth of the Indian economy, how these structural changes have contributed towards improvement and increase in the growth of Indian economy, and how the changes in the structure contributed to the sectoral trends in national income of India. If you come to the structure of Indian economy, the structure of Indian economy can be explained as a brief overview on economy at the time of independence and economy at present times. What exactly is structure? Just as there is a physical structure for recognizing a human being, in the same way we have a structure for every economic system, and this structure is made up of three important sectors: primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector. Depending upon the development process, different economies will have different sectors as their primary economy or primary sector. For example, if you come to the developed countries, there, because already the development has taken place and because they are industrially well developed, the primary sector happens to be the industrial sector and the service sector. But if you come to the Indian economy, since agriculture is the backbone of the Indian economy since ages, the primary sector happens to be the agricultural sector. Agriculture being the backbone of the Indian economy, the structure of Indian economy is made up of agriculture as the primary sector, industry as the secondary sector, and services as the tertiary sector. So, that is the difference between the developed economies, where industrial and service sector happens to be the primary sector, and the underdeveloped or developing economies like India, where agricultural sector plays a prominent role, and hence it is considered as the primary sector of the economic system. So, in order to understand how the structural changes have taken place in the Indian economy, we have to make a comparative study between what was the structure of Indian economy during the time of the independence and how the structure of the Indian economy has changed in the present times. And for understanding this structure of the Indian economy, we utilize the national income data, and this national income data is always employed as a tool to study structural changes. If you see the Indian economy and its structure at the time of independence, Indian economy was an independent economy which was transformed by the Britishers during their 200 years of colonial rule and converted an independent, rich, wealthy economy of India into an exhausted economy, where the economy was exhausted by the Britishers in order to feed their economy, as they were in the process of industrial revolution, and by colonizing Indian economy they have transported the laborers, required laborers and the raw materials, and they have collapsed the Indian economy. The second important aspect at the time of independence was enormous and intense exploitation of the natural resources. Whatever Indian natural resources were there at that time, whether it could be the cotton textiles or whether it could be the jute or any other natural resource which was available in plenty in the Indian economy, was totally exploited. They were transported in huge quantities without even thinking that the Indian industries may require the raw materials, and see the unfortunate incident where the Britishers have totally taken away the wealth of the Indian economy in the form of natural resources. Then coming to the human resources, India always had rich human resources from times immemorial, but the human resources were overexploited by the Britishers in the form of transporting them and utilizing them only as physical laborers without having any kind of proper education, and no facility was made available to the Indian human resources to get educated. So, this can simply be told as the right of proper education was totally denied to the human resources of India, as a result of which Indian human resources remained poor. And one of the important aspect explaining or understanding the structure of the Indian economy happens to be the capacities and capabilities of the human resources which were at their lowest level. If you see the impact factor on 3 sectors, because of these conditions during the time of independence in the structure of the Indian economy, the impact on 3 sectors, that is agricultural sector, industrial and service sector, was quite negative, unsatisfactory. If you take the first sector, agricultural sector, there was massive stagnation and continuous deterioration in the agricultural sector in the form of the productivity was very low. No person was bothered about increasing the productivity of the agriculture. The condition of the farmer was very poor. Then the Indian agriculture was a kind of gambling in monsoons, was highly vulnerable in the sense that there was no guarantee whether the productivity that is attained in the last year is going to be continued or not. And the presence of the land tenure system in the form of zamindari system, royatwari system and mahalwari system, these 3 systems were exploiting the farmers by means of collecting a huge amount of farm production in the form of taxes. And there was no financial assistance given to the farmers, as there were no mature kind of banks or maybe the institutions which can provide financial assistance to the farmers, because of which the farmers were forced to depend upon the money lenders for getting huge loans at high rates of interest. And the last one is commercialization of agriculture, where agriculture was totally transformed into commercial agriculture, where Indian farmers were forced to produce only those commodities or that particular farm products which were going to serve as raw materials to the industries of the Britishers. So, in this way agriculture was totally dilapidated during the time of independence, and that was one of the important factor which made the Indian economy to remain backward soon after the independence. If you come to the industrial sector, under this industrial sector, the process which was taken up by the Britishers, or the British rule of 200 years contributed towards deindustrialization. We can see there the handicrafts got totally decayed, textile industries totally lost its sheen, precious stonework became quite unpopular because it was neither given any kind of assistance nor it was encouraged. The metal industry also lost its popularity. Then because there were already the machine made products being sold in the Indian markets, Indian industries had to face tough competition from such machine made products, and the modern industry was subjected to very slow growth, because neither a way was provided nor any kind of financial assistance nor any motivation was given for the growth of modern industrial sector. And modern industrial sector growth definitely depends upon the basic and heavy industries which were not at all established by the Britishers, because they wanted the deindustrialization process to become realistic in Indian economy. Coming to the impact factor of such a structure left over by the British rule on service sector, the service sector was poor and backward growth because of in the form of discriminatory tariff policy and very poor foreign trade. The service sector was not at all allowed to have even minimum amount of growth, as a result of which the service sector's growth was very minimum during the time of independence. If you see this particular table, we can see here the composition of the gross domestic product and the growth rates. In 1950-51 to 1959-60, that is during a decade period, the primary sector's share was 56%, secondary sector's share was 16%, tertiary sector's share happened to be 28%. That is, during the time of, or maybe at the earlier times of independence, the share of primary sector into GDP was 56%. In spite of contributing 56% of the share, the growth rate was just 2.3% in primary sector. And we have already seen what are the causes for such a kind of low and negative growth rate in the primary sector. Secondary sector share happens to be 16%, but still the growth rate was quite satisfactory when compared with the growth rate in the primary sector. Tertiary sector's growth rate was 28%, denoting or notifying a growth rate of 4.1%. The overall growth rate of the GDP was 3.7% between 50-51 and 1959-60. The various growth rates and the shares by different sectors towards the GDP of the Indian economy for different years is given, but quite interesting if we make a comparison between 50-51 and 2009 and 10. So, in 50-51, while the share of the primary sector was 56%, in 2009 and 10 it has come down to 20.3, and the growth rate also has come down. If you take the contribution or the share of the industrial sector, in 50-51 it was 16%, and in 9 and 10 it has increased to 25.15. The overall amount of increase is not quite satisfactory also. However, the growth rate has notified a significant improvement in the form of it was 5.7% during 50-51, which increased to 25.15%, 8.6%. Then if you come to the tertiary sector, in 1950-51 it was 28% share, and the tertiary sector's share has drastically increased to 54.55%. Growth rate was 4.1% during 50s, and during 2010 it increased to 8.5%. The growth rate was, overall growth rate was 8.4%. That is over a period of maybe 60 years. If you take 2010 as the year, we were able to increase the growth rate from 3.7% to 8.4% only. So, very interesting aspect over here is when the economy is developing, the structural change should happen in such a way that where the growth in the agricultural sector should come down, and but the growth of the industrial sector should move at a higher pace, and later on the pace of increase in the growth rate should get shifted to the service sector. But here in the case of India, whatever growth rate has taken place over a period of 60 to 70 years, this major amount of growth or improvement or development has taken place in the tertiary sector rather than in the industrial sector. And from this point of view, we can say that still there is a scope for Indian economy to increase the growth rate and improve the performance of the industrial sector. When compared with the other developed countries, the Indian economy is still lagging behind in the industrial sector. That is what is the outcome that we can get from understanding this particular table. Then if you come to the occupational distribution of the working population, we have seen the share of agricultural sector, industrial sector and service sector to the GDP, which tells us about the trends in the contribution of different sectors to the national income. Now, it is the occupational distribution of working population. So, primary sectors contribution reducing, industrial sectors contribution slightly increasing, service sectors contribution increasing at a higher pace is equally made responsible by the changes in the occupational distribution of working population. What do you mean by occupational distribution of working population? The entire labor force who are in between the age of 18 years to 58 years or maybe 60 years is considered as the working population, and how this working population is distributed in different occupations also denotes the structural changes. Once upon a time, when Indian economy was in the early days of its development, maybe 56 you can see here, I think in 1901 it is better to compare between 1951 and 9 and 10. 72% out of every 100 labor force, 72% were engaged in the agricultural sector, 11 people were engaged in the secondary sector, and 16.7% or 16 persons or 17 persons were engaged in the tertiary sector. But if you just compare to 9 and 10, from 72.1 we have reduced, or the occupational distribution has changed, where the number of dependent workers on agricultural sector decreased to 53.5, secondary sector 20.9, and tertiary sector 25.6. In spite of all these things, we can say that majority of the population even today are also dependent upon the agricultural sector, though agricultural sector is not contributing as much as it was contributing during the earlier times of independence. If you take the tertiary sector, the amount of dependency on the tertiary sector or the total working population dependent on the tertiary sector happens to be just 25.6, but the contribution rate from the tertiary sector is quite high. Then from 1947 to 1991, what was the structure of the Indian economy? What were the changes that were introduced in by the respective Indian governments, due to which the structure of the Indian economy has changed? We have first adopted the Soviet styled planned economy. We were very much nearer to the Russia, as a result of which the planning system, which was quite popular in Russia, was simply adopted by Indian government, and we have introduced this planning system. A planning commission was established in 1951, and we have almost completed 12 5-year plans in the course of time. Then protectionist economic policies. The public sector was given protection, and all the policies which were prepared during the time of, or maybe between 1947 and 1991, have contributed totally to the expansion of the public sector, and whatever number of jobs or the number of government employees in the public sector, or number of working labor force getting government jobs was more in the between 1947 and 1991, because the public sector was protected, and the aim of the government was to expand the public sector. And extensive state intervention. The government always interfered in the market affairs. Government used to play an important role in fixation of the prices and decision of the firms pertaining to what type of goods have to be produced and what should be the supply in the market. So, the important aspects of demand and supply of different commodities and services was totally decided by the government, and the government ultimatum was considered as the kind of permission to take up the production of any goods and services. And then we have the economic regulation license Raj, which is also called as dirigism. So, this license Raj here indicates that if anybody wants to establish a new kind of industry or firm or whatever it may be, they have to take the license from the government, and this taking or getting the permission or the grant or the license from the government was called as economic regulation indirectly, because the government wanted to regulate the activities of the private sector, because it wanted to protect the government sector, expand the government sector, and make available more and more jobs to the working labor force only through the government sector. All this happened only because of the planning process which was adopted from the Russia, because under this planning process, definitely the economic system has to be protected by the government, and the state intervention should be there in the market, so as to restrict the monopolistic activities of the private sector. The structure of the Indian economy in 1991 onwards. So, for a very long period of time, that is from 47 to 1991, everything was going on perfectly in the form of expansion of the public sector, and employment of the labor force in the form of government jobs in the public sector. But somehow in the course of time, the public sector has become quite backward in terms of its production as well as performance. And in 1991 there was a Cold War, and the Cold War has got ended between the two superpowers, Russia and USA. Then in India there was a severe balance of payments crisis in 1991, where I think at that particular time in 1991, P.V. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister. By the time he took charge as the Prime Minister, the situation of the Indian economy was so poor that we didn't even had a good amount of money in the government exchequer to pay the petrol charges from where to the country from where we were importing petrol. So, that was the kind of situation pertaining to the government exchequer. So, in order to overcome this balance of payments crisis, government has gone for the LPG reforms, adoption of broad economic liberalization in India, where the doors of the Indian economy were totally open. Till that time we were protecting our borders, we were not we were trying to do the foreign trade, but only under the rules and regulations prescribed by the government, and different tariff policies were being followed by the government. So, under this adoption of broad economic liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms were adopted. Then there was an information technology revolution where we have the digitalization of the economy, and everything has become almost a kind of the this information technology revolution has made the things so easier, and globalization has become quite easy, where people can move from one country to another country without any kind of restrictions. All the restrictions which were previously there before 1991 on the movement of the commodities and on the movement of the labor totally were removed, totally were liberalized, and now any kind of promising entrepreneur who wants to establish any industry can come forward and simply take the permission of the government, and for getting the permission also now the waiting period is not going to be the years, but very minimum period during which he will be provided the license for the purpose of establishing a minimum permission kind of license for establishing the firm which he wants to. So, this is a part of the liberalization. Privatization, now under this privatization, the expansion of the public sector is totally reduced. More and more government jobs are going to be provided in the private sector, and market is totally made free from the regulatory system of the government, where the demand and supply, which are called as invisible powers as per the Adam Smith's perfect competition theory, are going to play an important role in fixing the prices of the commodities and services. The government intervention in the form of fixing the prices and prices of the commodities and services is totally eliminated. Globalization, India is made a part of the globe, and the restrictions, the movements on the commodities and services from one country to another country are totally removed, and globalization has made India a part small or reduce the geographical boundaries of India to as small as a village, and it has become a part of the globe. So, these are some of the important changes in the structure of the Indian economy from 91 onwards. The growth of Indian economy after the introduction of the 1991 economic reforms, Indian economy has given or projected an impressive growth. There was a Hindu growth rate called as 3.5%, which was continuously experienced by the Indian economy during the time of the plans, maybe for so many decades. So, the annual average GDP growth rate being 3.5% is popularly known as Hindu growth rate, in spite of making huge allocations under the budget and interchanging the priorities which were given under various 5-year plans to different sectors. We were able to achieve only 3.5% growth. So, however, as after 1991, because of the introduction of this economic reforms, we have crossed this Hindu growth rate, and we were able to achieve as high growth rate as 8.9% in 9th 5-year plan and 8th 5-year plan. So, on per capita income basis, IMF ranked India as 142nd by GDP nominal and 125th by GDP on purchasing power parity. Then attained a growth rate between 6% to 7%, the highest being during the 8th plan. India accounted for 7.2% of global economy in 2002 in triple P terms and 3.4% in nominal terms in 2002. The other growth indicators of Indian economy are, we have our economy has become a diverse economy with modern agriculture blended with traditional village farming, modern industries and multitude services. Agriculture employs less than half of the Indian population. Service sector employs less than 1/3 of the labor force, but serves as a major source of economic growth. Long-term growth perspective of India remains positive with rich demographic dividend. When compared with any other country in the world, we have the highest percentage of the working population between that is the labor force between the age group of 18 to 60 years. And the saving and investment rates are also quite satisfactory, and we are getting more and more increasingly integrated with the global economy. These all are indicators of the growth attained by the Indian economy after 1991. So, it has emerged, Indian economy emerged as world's 6th largest consumer market, where 70% of the consumer market is because of the private domestic consumers only in the form of private domestic consumption. 30% comes in the form of government spending, investments and exports. Indian labor force is world's 2nd largest with nearly 5 crore or 500 million workers, and foreign direct investment worth $74.4 billion is contributed by the service sector. Quite a robust kind of growth is mentioned over here by the service sector, combined with the computer industry and the telecom industry. Service sector, computer industry and telecom industry play a very important role in increasing the FDI accumulations of the Indian economy. Then service sector remains fastest growing sector with 50% GDP contribution to in the present contemporary economy. India grew up to be the world's 4th largest foreign exchange reserves country by 2020 with $88.314 billion. The pharmaceutical industry, IT industry, construction and real estate, telecommunication, chemical industry, tourism industry, automobile industry, retail and e-commerce markets, all these have notified robust growth, trying to contribute positively in the process of transforming India from its present developing status to soon going to become a developed country. Then if you come to the sectoral trends in in national income in India, sectoral trends denotes changes in the occupational structure of labor forces and the related changes in the sector wise national income distributions, and directly caused by the changes in the structure and growth of the Indian economy. If you see the sectoral trends in national income in India, there is a comparative study in this slide between 1951 and 2010. Sectoral trends comprise of changes in the occupational distribution between 51 and 10, changes in the national income distribution between 51 and 2010. If you see the primary sector, 72.1% was the dependency ratio of the labor force on the primary sector, which has come down to 53.5% in 2010. If you see the national income distribution, it was 56% of the national income was distributed or was the share of the primary sector, which has come down drastically to 20.3%. If you take the secondary sector, 10.7% of the labor force were dependent on secondary sector in 51, which has increased to 20.9% in 2010, but the contribution was 16% in 1951, which has increased to 25.15% in 2010. If you take the tertiary sector, 17.2% of the working population were dependent on the service sector in 51, the contribution was as low as 28%. But if we come to the 2010, 25.6, if you can see a very minimum increasing labor force in the tertiary sector, increased to 25.6, contribution has been quite satisfactory or more than satisfactory. It is 54.55%, which is because of the robust growth in the industries which we have already enlisted in the previous slide. Then coming to the next part, that is your previous questions asked in AppSC as well as in TSPSC. The first one you can see, discuss the nature of sectoral contribution of income to national income of India since independence. So, from 1947 till 2010, what were the sectoral contributions to national income, sector wise contribution, primary sector how much it was contributing in 1951 and how much it is contributing in 2020 or 2010, whatever kind of data is available to you. You can make a comparative study between these 2 years pertaining to the sector wise contribution of income to national income of India. The second question asks you, explain the important sectoral changes in post independence Indian economy with respect to national income contribution and workforce. The difference between the first question and the second question is, first question asks you to explain about the changes in sectoral contribution of income to national income only, but the second question asks you to show how there was a change in both the occupational structure of the population in different sectors and the national income contribution made by the different sectors to the Indian GDP. Then if you come to the industry, third question, industrial growth rate has lagged behind in the overall growth of GDP in the post reform period. Give reasons. So, we have seen through the tables that the growth process should be from the industrial sector to the service sector, but however, the total amount of growth or development which has been notified was directly related to the service sector only. So, why this has happened? What are the reasons? The reasons could be many. First important thing, we have established basic and heavy industries, but we have not given the same kind of priority in continuing the establishment of this industries. Second, the industries were not able to generate employment opportunities to the labor force at an expected rate. And third important reason was government gave more importance to the development of the service sector rather than to the industrial sector, because service sector had the greater scope in India to absorb higher labor force, and it was also registering a speeding kind of growth rate also. And how far the recent changes in the industrial policy are capable of increasing the industrial growth rate. Recent changes here are asked about the 1991 industrial policy resolution. Industrial policy resolution of 1991 has introduced liberalization, privatization, globalization, where the industrial sector was totally opened up, and the industrialists were provided licenses at a very less amount of time, so as to encourage them to establish say various types of industries. If you see the expected questions can be like this. How the direct questions like how the structural changes contributed to the growth of the Indian economy. So, yes, of course, we have moved from a Hindu growth rate of 3.5% to 8.9% registering in 8th 5-year plan. Definitely, the rate of growth after the introduction of the 1991 industrial type of industrial policy happens to be somewhat better and satisfactory when compared with the prior 1991 industrial policy. So, definitely the structural changes contributed towards the growth of the Indian economy. However, it is still unsatisfactory only because the status of Indian economy becomes equivalent to the status of developed economies once if we are going to cross the growth rate from a single digit growth rate, and we are going to achieve a double digit growth rate. Second one, compare and analyze the sectoral trends in national income distribution in India between 51 and 2019. Then critically analyze the pattern of growth in Indian economy since 1951 onwards. And another question, a kind of discussion, whether structural changes serve as catalyst to economic development, discuss. So, under this discussion you have to define what structural changes are and what economic development is, how these structural changes that have taken place in India between 1947 and till today have contributed towards economic development of the country. So, with this I come to the conclusion of the second topic belonging to the paper Indian Economy and Development, Structure and Growth of the Indian Economy. With this I conclude the second class pertaining to the national income. Today we have tried to understand what is the structure of the Indian economy, what were the changes that have taken place in the structure of the Indian economy from 1947 onwards, and how the changes in the structure have brought changes in the national income trends and the occupational trends, as a result of which definitely the Indian economy has registered a satisfactory growth over 75 years of independence. Thank you.